Joy, a woman in her 30s, had been in a long relationship with her fiancé, Ken. After years of dating, they had recently gotten engaged, and Joy had begun planning their wedding. Ken was everything she could have asked for. Kind, considerate, and always ready to support her. Despite coming from modest means, he loved Joy deeply and did everything in his power to provide for her, working tirelessly at his job, often putting in long hours to ensure they could live comfortably, even at the cost of his own needs. He believed that love, patience, and hard work were all they needed to build a fulfilling life together. However, as much as Joy appreciated Ken's efforts, a part of her yearned for more. She had always envisioned a life of luxury and comfort. Many of her friends lived in a world that seemed far removed from her own. They came from wealthy families, held high-paying jobs, or had affluent partners who gave them access to a lifestyle full of extravagances that Joy could only dream about. Designer clothes, expensive jewelry, luxury handbags, and extravagant vacations. For them, it was as simple as a phone call or a swipe of a credit card. Every time Joy met up with her friends, she felt a pang of jealousy. She would listen to them talk about shopping sprees, fancy dinners, and weekend getaways. And with each new story, the longing inside her grew deeper. Why couldn't she have the same? As much as she loved Ken, she couldn't help but compare her life to the glamorous world her friends were living. The more she compared, the more restless and dissatisfied she felt. She began to feel embarrassed by the modest life Ken could provide. As the day of her wedding approached, the conflict inside Joy intensified. Although she cared for Ken, a part of her longed for the lavish lifestyle her friends enjoyed. She began to question whether love alone could make her happy. Then one day, a new face entered her life. While browsing through social media, she received a friend request from a man named Victor. His profile oozed wealth and luxury. She didn't know him personally, but she had seen him around. Victor was a well-known businessman in the city. Though he was married, his reputation as a generous man who liked to spoil women with gifts was widely known. Initially, Joy hesitated, but the allure of his lavish lifestyle was too strong. Eventually, she accepted his friend request, telling herself there was no harm in having a little friendly connection. Soon after, Victor began showering Joy with attention. He invited her to lavish dinners, sent her expensive gifts, and treated her like royalty. He was charming, attentive, and seemed to understand her desires for the luxurious life she dreamed of. In Victor, Joy saw an opportunity to live the life she thought she deserved, and the excitement of it all became intoxicating. She found herself spending more time with him, drawn by the life he offered. A life Ken could never provide. But this double life came with risks, and deep down, Joy knew it. Weeks passed, and the wedding date grew closer. Joy was juggling her relationship with Ken and her secret encounters with Victor. It felt dangerous, but she kept convincing herself that no one would ever find out and that she had everything under control, or so she thought. Then, just days before her wedding, Joy's world began to unravel. She discovered she was pregnant. The news took her by surprise. While she should have been thrilled, after all, she and Ken were about to get married and start a family together. The situation was far from simple. Joy was consumed with fear. She had no way of knowing for certain who the father was. Was it Ken's child, or was it Victor's? The weight of a secret was unbearable. The thought of marrying Ken was such an enormous lie looming over her, making her feel guilty. Yet, she couldn't help but fear the consequences if it turned out the baby was Victor's. If Ken found out about her affair, her marriage would be over, and her reputation would be shattered. Joy couldn't bear the thought of Ken ever finding out about her betrayal. The fear of that possibility gnawed at her until it became too overwhelming to endure. In her desperation and panic, she made the painful decision to terminate the pregnancy. She convinced herself it was the only option, the best way to protect her future, her marriage, and Ken's trust. Once the pregnancy was over, she felt a mixture of relief and deep sorrow. She promised herself that she would start anew, that she would remain faithful to Ken, and that she would never allow herself to be swayed by temptation again. After all, she still loved him and believed they could build a happy life together. Finally, their wedding day arrived. It was a beautiful ceremony, filled with smiles, laughter, and the joy of everyone around them. To those who witnessed it, they were the perfect couple, beginning a wonderful life together. Joy tried her hardest to put the past behind her, determined to focus on her future with Ken and be the wife he deserved. Several months into their marriage, Joy and Ken began trying for a baby. But month after month, there were no signs of pregnancy. Initially, she assumed it was just taking longer than expected. She visited doctor after doctor, seeking answers, but each visit ended with more disappointing news. The doctors were unable to provide much hope, telling her that her chances of conceiving were slim. As the months went by, Joy's anxiety grew, and the weight of her secret became unbearable. She couldn't help but wonder if the abortion had left her unable to conceive. This thought plagued her day and night, and regret became a constant companion. She bitterly thought, if only I had kept the baby, I would have had a child by now, no matter who the father was. Her dreams of a perfect family with Ken now felt like an unreachable fantasy, slipping through her fingers. Her frustration and sorrow became increasingly obvious to Ken. At first, he tried to be supportive, reassuring her that they could keep trying or even explore other options. But Joy's sadness soon turned into bitterness, and she began to withdraw, haunted by the choices she had made. One day, Ken overheard a conversation that suggested something about Joy's past affair with Victor. Suspicion began to take root in his mind, and after pressing her for the truth, Joy finally broke down and confessed everything. The affair, the pregnancy, and the abortion. Ken was devastated. He had loved her with all his heart, made countless sacrifices for her, and now she had betrayed him. She begged him to understand, to forgive her, but Ken couldn't see her the same way again. He tried, but every time he looked at her, the lies, the betrayal, and the lost future stood between them. The damage was too deep. The deception, the lost child, it was all too much for him to bear. The revelation shattered something between them that could never be repaired. Heartbroken and unable to forgive her betrayal, Ken made the painful decision to leave. He couldn't stay with someone who had hurt him so profoundly. Their marriage ended, and Joy was left with nothing but regret. She realized too late that her desire for more had cost her everything she had truly valued. Now, she lived alone, carrying the weight of her decisions. The luxury she had longed for, the envy she had felt, it all seemed meaningless now. She had lost Ken, the one man who had ever truly loved her. Her choices had led her down a path of isolation and regret, and a future without Ken, and perhaps without the children she had once dreamed of having, seemed inevitable. As time went on, Joy often found herself reflecting on the life she could have had with Ken. She imagined the children they might have raised together, the quiet moments of happiness they could have shared. She had given all of that up for a fleeting moment of glamour, a choice that had cost her everything in the end. Now, looking around at her empty, hollow life, she knew there was only one person to blame: herself. In pursuing a dream that was never truly hers, she had lost the love, the trust, and the family she could have had.